Cette vidéo est sponsorisée par Italki. Je suis coach d'anglais et ça me saoule de toujours voir les mêmes 5 erreurs qui empêchent les Français de parler anglais couramment et avec confiance. Peut-être que vous comprenez bien ou très bien l'anglais, vous regardez Netflix avec les sous-titres, vous comprenez mes vidéos, mais quand c'est à vous de parler, dans la vraie vie, vous paniquez.
Can you speak in English?
Thank you.
Si ça vous parle, ça veut dire que vous faites probablement, sans même vous en rendre compte, une de ces 5 erreurs. Aujourd'hui, je les décortique et je vous donne de vraies solutions pour les éviter. Let's get into mistake number 1. You're scared of what other people might think about your English. So as adults, we really become masters of hiding all of our imperfections. We mostly do this because we are worried about what other people will think. So of course, if our language skills aren't perfect, we might try to hide those too. But the worst part is that this fear is totally killing your progress. So this is something that we need to learn how to overcome. Now, before I tell you how I think you should do that, let me just make you feel a little bit better. Now, I'm a native English speaker. I'd like to show you some of the comments that I receive about my English level on this channel. Je peux vous assurer que votre anglais se limite au bac 3, cordialement. Parce qu'elle croit qu'elle parle bien anglais. Elle, lol. Ton anglais est pas dingue non plus. Je pense que votre anglais est loin d'être au niveau de celui des 2 musiciens suédois du groupe ABBA. It's true, I will never speak English like a Swedish man. So if I can receive that kind of negativity around my English, you shouldn't feel bad that you do too. So what can you do? How can you overcome this fear? Because we can't control what other people do. We can only control how we react. I think first of all, try to think, what's the worst thing that could happen? Okay, maybe someone makes a negative comment. Maybe someone laughs. Okay, and then what? Really nothing. I think what can then really help is to think about why someone might be saying such a cruel thing. Very often, people who say nasty things are dealing with something within themselves. When they see you having the courage to speak English, even if it's not perfect, I think that can really trigger something inside of them and it makes them want to criticize you. So that cruelty, it really has nothing to do with you. And then sort of thirdly, I think we should just try to feel a bit of empathy for these people. I mean, imagine how sort of sad they must feel in a way to want to tear down someone for simply having the courage to speak English and kind of show some of their imperfections. And if nothing else, always remember the comments that I receive on my English because, yeah, it just goes to show you will never be good enough for these kinds of people. It's not worth trying. You do what makes you happy, go for it. Let's move on to mistake number 2. Too much input and not enough output. So the truth is that you are probably consuming way more English than you are producing. So maybe you watch Netflix with subtitles, you read articles, listen to podcasts, and you feel really productive, and you should. Those things are fantastic. But passive consumption will never make you a fluent speaker. This very problem reminds me of a friend, let's just call her Sarah, who I've known most of my life. Now, she grew up in a Mandarin-speaking household in Australia. Growing up, she could always understand her grandparents' stories, family jokes, she could watch movies in Chinese, but she always responded to her family in English, especially after she started school. So Sarah essentially became what some refer to as a passive bilingual or a receptive bilingual, meaning that she understood everything like a native speaker, but she couldn't speak like a native speaker. This continued on, and I specifically remember Sarah telling me about one of her grandmother's birthdays. Sarah was at the table and she really wanted to make a toast to honor her grandmother in her grandmother's native language. But in that moment, she just kind of froze and eventually she kind of stumbled through it in a sort of Chinese but mostly English mix. And she realized that she just really did not have the ability to make an emotional, heartfelt speech entirely in Chinese, in this language that she'd heard almost every day for 20 years. I think Sarah's story really perfectly illustrates how you can literally grow up surrounded by a language and still not be able to speak it confidently. And this is something that I see with a lot of English learners as well. We have an input overload, but when we don't push ourselves to speak, we feel that we understand English but can't speak it fluently. All right, so what can we do to fix this problem? I like to use the 2-to-1 rule, which means that for every 2 pieces of input, you want to force yourself to make 1 piece of output, however tiny it may be. So speaking is best, but writing also counts as output. If you read an article, maybe record a 2-minute voice note summarizing the article. If you watch a series on Netflix, write a couple of sentences about it. If you listen to a podcast, leave a comment. Be nice. We have so many options these days, but I will warn you that doing these things will make you significantly more uncomfortable than watching a series at home by yourself. That's the point. Your English will not improve in your head. It needs to come out through the mouth. All right, moving on. Let's see mistake number 3. You're not getting feedback. So maybe you are practicing, but you might not be getting the right kind of feedback. As we've seen in mistake number 1, you may be getting some kind of unwanted or unsolicited feedback, but this is probably not the kind of high quality feedback that you need. And I would be careful with believing any feedback that you receive. I have received things on this channel. For example, I had one person saying, I was definitely not a native English speaker because I said a 1-to-1 conversation, but we should say one-on-one. And they are partly right. This person is obviously a confident English speaker, but they're missing some nuance. The truth is that we can say both of those things. So you do need to be careful about, blindly believing advice, maybe in a comment on YouTube or some correction from a passive-aggressive coworker. But here's the thing. The people who you want feedback from, so either native English speakers or people who speak English so well that they also really understand the culture, these people will not freely correct your mistakes. And that's because it's a cultural thing. So in France, especially in mainland France, it's totally normal and acceptable to correct people. It's kind of seen like a way of showing respect to the French language.
Un croissant.
Non mais ça va pas, non, t'as vu comment tu parles?
And I love that, that's great, that's a part of French culture. Guys, don't change, but it is very different in English speaking culture. Correcting someone's language when it's not really necessary outside of an English learning context is considered quite rude. The focus is always on understanding. Of course, if I don't understand what someone has said, I will need to ask for clarification. Or maybe within a family, yes, people might correct one another, but not out in society. But unfortunately, as learners, we really want that feedback, and it's so important for improving our speaking skills and our confidence. So how can we overcome this mistake? Well, I think a fantastic way to get this feedback that you really need is with today's sponsor, italki. italki is an online platform where you can book personalized one-on-one or one-to-one language lessons with native English speakers. And this is so great for having the teacher's full attention and really centering the class around your needs. And I've recently started using italki to get in some Spanish conversation practice too.
Si tuvieras un superpoder, ¿cuál te gustaría que fuera?
Viajar en el tiempo.
Muy bien.
Pues de verdad lo utilizaría para hacer más cosas en mi vida. With italki, you're able to have conversation practice with native speakers, which in my experience really, really helps with building that confidence that you need before you go out and use your language in the real world. You're able to learn authentic language and improve not only your speaking skills, but also your listening skills. italki has over 30,000 teachers worldwide. And something that I really love is their filter system. So you can filter by a teacher's country of origin, for example, or even other languages that they speak. Now, one of the best parts about italki is that it works on a pay-per-lesson basis. So there's no need to sign up for a subscription. You're free to book lessons around your schedule anytime, and you can take lessons anywhere because everything is online. You can even take a lesson from a mobile device using the italki app. The truth is that there is absolutely no substitute for real human feedback. And there's just so much confidence that comes with having someone that you trust tell you the right way to say something, and then, you just never have to question yourself again. So if you are ready to get that feedback that you've been missing, click the link in the description to start your language learning journey with italki. Use my exclusive promo code GIA to buy 10 euros and receive 5 euros free on your first lesson. But this is only available for the first 50 lucky customers, so don't wait. Mistake number 4. You're focused on perfection, not communication. Now, don't get me wrong, it is fantastic to want to improve, to be better, and I can absolutely help you with that on this channel. But to be able to do that, you need to accept where you are and go from there. In French culture, there's definitely a lot of value placed on speaking well, speaking elegantly, using the subjunctive correctly, forming beautiful sentences and never repeating a word. And that's great, but that is your native language, and you cannot put the same type of pressure on yourself in a foreign language. The result is that you probably know way more grammar than most native speakers, but you might panic when you have to order food at a restaurant. While you're sitting there stressing about conjugating irregular past tense verbs, native speakers are out here saying, "She don't care."
She don't care. She don't care if we've been eating good.
She don't care what time it is no more.
And no one care. That was a joke. I know how to speak English. I'm gonna get a comment. Someone's gonna say, "Your grammar sucks." No one cares. And like I said, we're not even correcting each other. Here is what you need to simply accept. You will never be perfect in English, because even native speakers are not perfect. So there's no reason for you to hold yourself to an impossible standard. The real magic happens when you start to prioritize communication over perfection. And then those improvements that you're after will come naturally. Here's how you can fix this mistake. Instead of focusing on perfection and what you did wrong, focus on what you can do. Concrete things, concrete tasks that you can achieve in English. Maybe you can make a phone call and have your message be understood. Maybe you can send a professional email, or you can meet people while traveling and have a friendly conversation. All of these things might seem small, but they are huge. They are big wins. Maybe instead of asking yourself, was that elegant? Just think, was that effective? Good. Because good enough is good enough in English. If you want to be better than that in French, please go for it. I love that. Yes. Mistake number 5, saying no. How many times have you said no to an opportunity to speak English? You are rejecting a chance to practice and improve your English before it even begins. Sometimes the more we say no, the harder it becomes to say yes, and we start to build up this kind of prison. So by avoiding this difficult situation, we almost create more pain for ourselves in a different way. Now, I fell into this exact trap when I first came to France. So I was contacted by a company looking for English coaches who spoke French, which sounds perfect, right? But it wasn't, because I fell into a 3-day downward spiral, questioning my life, thinking, do I speak French? What if I make a mistake? What if I'm not fluent enough? How embarrassing. And I almost said no to a really great opportunity, because I feel like I was sort of waiting for some kind of permission that no one was ever going to give me. Like, you officially speak French now. It's okay to say that you do. Sometimes the only thing standing between you and improvement and ultimately speaking English fluently is your willingness to say yes. And I know that simply saying yes is actually quite scary, because saying yes means that you might make a mistake. You might feel embarrassed. You might need to speak slowly. You might show people that you are not perfect. And that is scary, but it is also fine. On the other hand, it takes zero courage to never use your English and to let somebody else handle every English speaking scenario in your life. So how can we fix this? Well, my advice might not surprise you. Start saying yes. On holiday?
Nothing beats a Jet2 holiday.
Okay, someone needs to speak to the waiter. I'll do it. Someone needs to speak to reception, organize some tickets. I'll do it. Maybe at work. Okay, someone needs to speak with an English-speaking client. Put your hand up, say, I'll do it. Little by little over time, you'll become known as the person who says yes, who's not going to fight or, try and get their way out of the situation. And what happens when you start doing this is like an identity shift. You become the person who speaks English, not the person who speaks English perfectly. You become the person who speaks English. And when you become that person, more and more opportunities start to come your way. You're the first person people think of when they need an English speaker. Doors open, there are more possibilities. But it all starts with one yes. Never forget that your English does not need to be perfect for you to say, I speak English. Your accent doesn't need to disappear completely for you to communicate. And even your confidence doesn't need to be 100% bulletproof for you to be a little bit brave. So stop saying no, because when you say no, you're saying no to your dreams. Never say no to a dream. I did say 5 mistakes, but dare I say there is a 6th and very serious mistake that many of you are making. I know for a fact, and that is not subscribing to this channel and signing up for my newsletter. But luckily for you, there is a very simple solution. You can subscribe very easily. You know how to use the internet, and you can sign up for my newsletter by clicking the link in the description. Once a month, I'll send you any interesting thoughts I've been having about the English language or any of my recommendations. Just trust me. The solution is to trust me. Don't forget to click the link in the description if you would like to try italki, where you get €5 off your first €10 spent on your first lesson. And then tell me how it goes. Send me an email. If you would like to see how I stopped making these mistakes and finally started to speak French, you might like this video. Bye.